year was 1926. Calvin Coolidge was the President of the United States, a nation of 116 million people. The federal budget for that year was just under $3 billion. Economic conditions in the country were troublesome. A loaf of bread cost 9 cents, milk was 46 cents a gallon, and you could buy a Model T Ford for just $525. In late 1925, in the sleepy southwest Texas town of San Antonio, on the outskirts of downtown, a small group of Christians gathered in a rented house at 3201 West Houston Street to sign papers as charter members of a new mission of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The church was to be called Mount Olive. For the remainder of 1925 to the spring of 1926, the fledgling mission would conduct services in the downstairs area of a house. The pastor and his family resided upstairs. In the spring of 1926, the church's chapel and school were funded, and construction began on the chapel. On August 29, 1926, the chapel was dedicated at 3103 Buena Vista Street. On Reformation Sunday of that year, in a meeting of the membership, Mount Olive was formally organized as a congregation. The early years of Mount Olive were met with hardship and turnover. Church leadership changed hands 4 times in the first 4 years. By 1929, the mission membership had dwindled to just 25 souls. The school closed for the summer with only 6 students. By late 1929, however, mission membership rebounded, increasing in each of the succeeding 14 years. An expansion that would include additional facilities like a parsonage and the tower for a new 600-pound bell. Between 1930 and 1943, the school enrollment, which had stood at 43 in 1930, would dramatically increase over the 10 years that followed, reaching 250 students by 1953. In the 7 progressive years that followed, both church and school experienced growth, necessitating the addition of a new school building and parish hall, which were dedicated in 1951. The future looked bright for God's church at Mount Olive as it prepared to celebrate its 25th anniversary in 1951. By God's grace, the 50s and 60s at Mount Olive were a time of exceptional growth. In the late 50s, with the church outgrowing its facilities and the school bursting at the seams, worship services were moved to a temporary facility near the outskirts of town at Westward Elementary School in Lackland Terrace. The church had purchased 5 3/4 acres of land on West Shire and Loop 410, and construction was underway to build a school building and a parish hall and sanctuary at the new location at 8138 West Shire. The new sanctuary was dedicated on July 15, 1962. Church membership stood at 189, with 315 enrolled in the day school. By 1969, the church would grow to 791 members, and on the 50th anniversary, the church in 1976 was home to 591 baptized souls. In 1977, the new chapel at Westshire was built and dedicated. The prospect for continued growth appeared strong as the end of a decade approached. But the life of the church, not unlike the lives of its members, is not always one of growth and prosperity. By the mid-1980s, membership began a troubling spiral downward in both school and church. The trials of the 1980s would prove to be a barometer for even greater challenges in the 7th decade of Mount Olive. With the Cold War ending and the U.S. military experiencing large cutbacks, Mount Olive's efforts to sustain membership across its ministries suffered. Nearby Kelly Air Force Base was forced to close. The large military demographic that had settled in the areas surrounding Mount Olive underwent a massive shift as families moved out of West San Antonio and even out of the city. Population in the surrounding Mount Olive area declined, as did incomes and property valuations. By the year 2003, membership had declined to just 25 souls. The small group gathered at Martin Luther Hall to decide the fate of the church. Not unlike that small group that had gathered together in a rented house 78 years earlier. There was much to pray about and for. Yet even in the somberness of the moment, the presence of the Holy Spirit was felt, and a sense of comfort came over the gathering. Faced with significant financial issues and a building in disrepair, the remaining members voted to keep the lights on and the doors of the church open. The Westshire property was to be assumed by the Texas District, and a $450,000 loan was taken out by the church to build a multi-use facility at 1604 and Marbach Road. On November 11, 2004, the new Mount Olive was dedicated. The year is 2016. The president leads a nation of 240 million people. The federal budget is over $1 trillion. The national debt stands at $20 trillion. A loaf of bread will cost you over $1, a gallon of milk over $3, and you can buy any number of models of Ford for as low as $20,000. And out on the new outskirts of town, Mount Olive is growing again, celebrating 12 years at its current location. Average attendance is 75. Over 125 baptized members call Mount Olive home. A daycare and learning center lives again to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. The possibilities for growth are endless and aspiring. History is, by God's grace, still in the making. The church is bigger than the sum of its parts, and all who have ministered here, taught here, and worshiped here have been a part of the long and continuing life of God's church at Mount Olive. And God has led us all. An inspired Apostle Paul said it best, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Such is the life and heart and soul of Mount Olive. From the footprints of the past to the footsteps that are being made today toward the future, all are made to the glory of God.